The life in DRSI's hostel is amazing. We create beautiful memories throughout the day. We get up early in the morning, we freshen up quickly for the jogging, and then come back for a morning nutritious and delicious breakfast.
Let's embark the journey of learning. So here we are into the academic block.
This is our sports time. It's mandatory for all to participate, and believe me, we love this time.
Here we are to experience the beautiful learning environment that is our meditation time. This session helps the students to distress and recharge for our evening study hours further.
Time to thank God for all of the blessings He had showered on us throughout the day.
Hostel life is where you live your life to the fullest. Hostel life is always fun to experience, that will help you get to learn new things that will help you in the future. The DRSI's hostel never ends. It's eternal. We sleep for a new morning and a fresh beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. I'm Harsha, trainee at EDU TV. Today, we delve into the relevance of boarding schools in education. Joining us are Mr. Pankaj Joshi, Principal of Academic World School, and Ms. Nandita Sahu, Principal of Jindal Modern School. Guiding our discussion is Ms. Mona Mehra, founder of Vision Search. Let's explore how boarding schools shape today's educational landscape. Thank you for being here. Let's begin. Over to Mona, ma'am.
Thank you, Pankaj ji, and thank you, Nandita ji, for being
you.
here. We have a very important discussion today, the relevance of boarding schools in today's educational landscape and balancing traditional and modern needs. Now, as you were talking about both boarding school as well as day school, my first question is, what unique advantages a boarding school gives against a day school or vice versa? Which would you think is the unique advantage for each one of the schools? I would like to start with Pankaj ji, please.
Okay, so I think, it is very difficult to completely differentiate between the advantages and disadvantages of residential and boarding schools. However, both do fine, of course, and both do everything that they are supposed to do. But I think in a boarding school, particularly if you want to compare it with a day school, what happens is there are a few things that schools are expected to do, right? Schools are expected to develop their students academically, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and of course, emotionally. So these are the 5 areas where all schools are supposed to develop them. The edge or the advantage that boarding schools have over day boarding schools or day schools is that in day schools, the students are there for, say, roughly on an average about 6 hours, sometimes for 6 days a week and sometimes for 5 days a week, depending on what kind of a system they are following. But in boarding schools, the schools have a larger stage with them, and the kids are there with us for 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. So the entire playout is very, very different. The boarding schools can take entire responsibility. They can plan their schedules. They can have their, lessons in various things developed and delivered in a manner which is more conducive to the development of these 5 faculties that I talked about. So it's not clearly about advantages and disadvantages, but it's about having more opportunity to fulfill our vision. Because schools, particularly day boarding or boarding, schools are with the same vision, right? So no boarding school says that we are doing something different. It's just that we do things differently. We do things in a more deeper manner.
Absolutely. Very well said that you do things in a different manner. Very well said. Now let's hear it from Nandita ji, please. Nandita ji.
See, thanks, Pankaj. I think Pankaj has put it very succinctly that, the vision of educational institutions, there is a commonality there. However, what is the biggest differentiator is the time. Residential school is a 24/7 environment and a day school is limited with time. Now, the primarily catering to the child's overall development, whether it be mental, emotional, social, which Pankaj has already mentioned. Because I worked in both the systems over the years, yes, Pankaj is right, and I agree totally with him, and I'm with him on this. There are advantages and disadvantages to both the systems. But as I currently today, I'm heading a day school which has a large student strength of over 5,500 students, and a large faculty and other facilities and everything is there. But today, when I run this, system of a pure day school with limited functioning hours, I feel in comparison to a boarding structure, not what has happened over the years or the tradition of boarding schools, but today the most stark contrast is the over regimentalization in a boarding school versus the freedom which today's youngster demands, requires, and considers it his or her actual fundamental right. Why should I? Which is why, if you give a student a choice, I don't know, I would still, willingly, how many children want to opt to study in a boarding school? Because I can tell you in the metros, the trend is declining. I can talk about Delhi, I can talk about Mumbai. There is a declining trend in children themselves wanting to opt for boarding schools. So the only reason that I can figure out is the regimentalization, because we all know Pankaj is running a wonderful boarding school. He will tell you that in a boarding school, for the streamlining of operations and for running the institution, everything has to be planned well in advance. Every schedule, every allocation of time, every event, every program is planned well in advance, because you are catering to keep 24 hours of a child who is entrusted to your care. You have to look after 24 hours of that child's time. So everything has to be compartmentalized, everything has to be scheduled, otherwise you would have chaos.
Absolutely.
And of course, in a day school, it's very easy for me to say that the children come at 8 o'clock in the morning and they go at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's it. I just have to teach them English, physics, maths, and chemistry, and there off you go. So there is a vast difference. The responsibility in a boarding school and the care, it all is a different parameter. But if you ask me today, the most stark difference is the lack of freedom in a boarding school versus comparative more freedom for the children from the students' point of view in a day school.
Absolutely. Very well said. That freedom right now, if you look at the students right now, they are more looking about, they talk a lot about the freedom aspect. Now, one thing as a mother, I would like to know, I've seen my friends put their children in boarding schools. What is the age would you suggest would be the right age for a child to go into boarding school? Because if it is too young, that bonding between the parents and the child does not happen. But there has to be some age. What is your recommendation?
I would say, a lot of boarding schools start as early as third class or fourth class. But in my opinion, I think Pankaj, I don't know Pankaj's views, but I think he will agree with me. I think entry point should be at 6th standard.
Entry branch.
Not before that. Not before that. The children are not emotionally ready, and they're not emotionally ready, and you have a different set of problems catering to a primary, because earlier than that, it encompasses primary education, and primary education comes with its own set of entire paraphernalia, parameters, and functioning style of primary education, which includes not just tutelage in academia, but it involves basically childcare. So primary education is a very, very different concept, and you can't mix it up with, So in my opinion, and I come from myself, I have studied in a boarding school with the Irish nuns in the hills of Dalhousie. I was there, and they had children even in pre-primary, the entry point was actually 4 years. So I've studied in that kind of a boarding school myself. Of course, I went when I was in the 6th.
Okay.
But I've seen those kind of boarding schools exist. But and I've seen different. I mean, been exposed to variety of them. But in my opinion, class 6 seems to be. Pankaj, we can discuss that. But I
Exactly.
feel, yeah. May your views, Pankaj, please.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking as you were speaking, and if you really look at the boarding school system that came into India roughly in the 19th century, and it was very prominent in Europe and UK, sometime around it started in the 17th century and the 18th century, and most of the prominent boarding schools of UK and of India as well, which came up in the 19th century, they have started around class 6 or class 7. So, which is an age of about 11 years, 12 years. And if we really look back at the system of boarding schools in India going ancient times, the Gurukul system, there also, I think the age was roughly that only where the ashram going sanskar was roughly happening at the time of puberty, which means the completion of primary stage and then moving on to middle school. So that's the type, and I think that's what my basic understanding also about schooling in a boarding school is. So class 7, 6, roughly the same. And out of personal experience also, because I've taught in a school which started at class 7, and as Ma'am Sahu's experiences, I also studied in a boarding school, and not as a boarder. I was a day boarder, but that particular day boarding school, which was being run by the Irish brothers, it started boarding. If I remember correctly, if I go back down memory lane, I think class 2 or class 3 they were starting it. And as I look back, I feel I can actually imagine some very young boys crying and coming to class like toddlers. And I don't think that's a great idea of having a boarding at such a young age. I think class 7 or class 6 is the best
I
time to
think,
start.
Pankaj, as we concentrate and begin to shift our focus, or actually share our focus with the IQ development, and along with that becomes EQ and SQ.
Yeah.
Social quotient and
Question.
emotional quotient become very important. So you're right. We have to see the emotional readiness of a child. We don't want these children to be at some point later in life, now that we understand the value of behavioral changes in children. And in earlier times, perhaps these scientific advancements or understandings were not shared in such an open manner, or perhaps so relevant in the educational stratosphere. But today they are. And we have to see that the children are emotionally and socially ready to accept community living.
Absolutely.
Otherwise it can, the scope of the kind of damage it can do to the psyche of a child who's not ready to accept residential school system is phenomenal. And this can include scarring, for emotional scarring for life. And where will you find later on in life, 10 years, 15 years, 20
Yeah.
years from the time the child is out of school, and you're carrying emotional scarring and emotional baggage of way back what happened to you in your boarding school? So you have to see the emotional readiness, the social readiness for a child to accept community living.
Absolutely.
And one of the other things, yeah, and one of the other things that I always tell parents, who come to us and talk about, sending their children to boarding schools. And I think the role of parents also is very prominent, because that kid who's being sent to a boarding school, as you said, needs to be mentally prepared, socially prepared, and emotionally prepared. Because if that preparation is done by parents beforehand, I think the child is much more successful as a boarder in a boarding school, because they are mentally prepared for it. So the cases of homesickness will always be there. Homesickness, there's nothing negative about homesickness. But then that kid will be emotionally and socially and mentally prepared to handle that homesickness, which is obviously a byproduct of, coming into a boarding school. So I think parents have a very, very huge role to play over here, because parents do prepare and they do will have to lay that foundation where the children are socially and emotionally ready to enter a boarding school and be a part of it and contribute to their own productivity and contribute to their own learning.
Absolutely. So, Pankaj, in your boarding school, when you talk about boarding schools, there is a lot of social and emotional well-being of children that needs to be catered to, because they're
Yes.
leaving their families and there are so many issues they might come up with. So, what is the support system that you have? Can you just elaborate on that?
See, in any boarding school, one of the most important things is that the support system we as school leaders create inside the school, right? So I think one of the best things which is available in any boarding school is the huge human resource that is available, and that is the adults in the school. Because and when I talk about the adults, I'm talking about the teachers, I'm talking about the librarians, I'm talking about the doctors, I'm talking about, the wardens. And they are people who, on an average, would have lived roughly about 25 to 20 years of life. And what they have with them, apart from their degrees and their college qualifications, is life experience. And this is the huge human resource that we have in schools. And this needs to be exploited in a boarding school. So, what I personally feel and I apply in the schools that I've seen, I've worked with, and also the school that I'm currently in, I try to divide the entire number of boarders in the school into smaller groups and make these adults responsible for their social and emotional well-being. There is, of course, a system of reporting and a system of, monitoring and governing. But this individual who is given charge of, say, about 10 students, sometimes 10 to 15 students, is the first port of call for these students and the parents. And he acts as a bridge between the students and the parents and the management of the school. And he is the first person who the student we would want the student to always go to in case of any advice needed or any mishap, because mishaps do happen once in a while. Of course, we
Absolutely.
all try to be as secure and as safe as possible, because safety is one of my biggest concerns in a boarding school.
Yes.
But I think what we need to do in a boarding school, particularly, is provide emotional and psychological support. And this happens with the use of this human resource which is available in the school. And another important thing is the training of this resource, because we need to have constant workshops, particularly for the pastoral angle from which the boarding schools uh, prepare themselves for. So we do have regular teacher training, regular pastoral staff training in the schools, and we try to keep our staff updated so that they can really provide this kind of a much needed social and emotional and psychological support to our children.
Absolutely. Which is very well required, because when we talk about human resources, it's the personal connect which comes into the picture, and
Yeah.
that which is very much required. Nandita ji, what you would like to add to that?
Yes, of course, what Pankaj is saying is absolutely right. And I can give you my situation, which I'm currently facing. See, I'm running a large school with a large number of students. Now, in the short time that the children are here, and when Pankaj mentions pastoral care, I want to say that I want to add that pastoral care in the day school system has become not just important, it is imperative. And without looking into a very, very anarchic and distracted community of youngsters, because it's 6 hours that they are in school, they under some sort of supervision and control, and they are told what to do, move from class to class, from the field to the classroom, maybe to the library, whatever. Their movement is controlled, but it is the after school hours that they are exposed to freedom, and the challenge of being able to handle that freedom and the problems is social and emotional problems which our youngsters today are plagued with. In a day school system, pastoral care becomes so important, because the child knows that nobody at home is listening to me, and my friends circle or the peer pressure is another story altogether. So they look anxiously even for that small little window of time that they can get. with an adult who can empathize with them, who can connect with them, even if the time is limited. You will not imagine that the children come up on their own. There is so much of angst, there is so much of there is so much of there is so much of chaos in the mind of today's youngster, of a teenager. There is rebellion, there is anger, there is stress, there is anxiety, there is self-esteem issues. All these things, they find it a challenge to open a pathway of communication with the parent, and they don't want to be judged by their peer group outside the school. So they turn towards those very teachers who they feel will have an empathetic ear to listen to their problems. So we have upped our number of counselors in the school. Earlier on in schools, it was mandatory for a CBSE school to have one counselor on board, but I have 4 of them.
Oh, great.
I have 4 full-time counselors in the school. So, because the problems and the issues that come with, whether it is learning disabilities to behavioral issues, whether it is counseling problems to taking care of discipline issues, everything, because of large number also, and I want dedicated people. These people are not teachers in the system. They independently, unequivocally handle only the counseling cell in the school. I have career counselors, not to be confused with career counselors, because there's a lot in common with a senior school behavior counselor and a career counselor, because that is where they plan out their future trajectories. But it is behavioral counseling, full time in the school, children available, and children made aware that they can, without fear, without any apprehension, approach the counseling cell for help, for just a year, listening ear, for some kind of support. And we have had a major amount of success in the last 1.5 years or so, ever since I've made this change in the school, that we have requested the management that we wanted more counselors. And we find that not only children, but even the parents, they are so hard pressed. They're also, it's very difficult for a young parent today to bring up a child. They have got parenting issues, children have got growing up issues. So these counseling cells become a very vital part of a system. In fact, what Pankaj said, workshops and training is so crucial for this particular generation that we are dealing with, because ultimately every teacher should be a counselor. Every teacher should be a counselor, whether you're working in the pastoral care system in a residential community, whether you're actually, because you're a teacher. Anyone who enters an educational institution has something to impart, whether inside the classroom, whether outside in the field, whether in the library, whether in the theater block, or whether through drama, music, dance, or art. Everyone is a teacher. I would say even the person, the janitorial staff, the housekeeping staff who looks after the school facility management, they also offer learning. They offer learning in their own way, which is so important for children to understand. That is why we have something known as Shram Divas and Shram Dan. Very, very important. So everybody is a teacher, but more so, every teacher who is directly connected with a child in the classroom must be aware of basic counseling skills, because you can earmark signs of stress, depression, anxiety, and anger and violence well in advance in time, to be able to manage and put a remedy in place.
Absolutely. Very well said, Nandaji, because every teacher who is in touch with a child will first know the signs of, anger, depression, anxiety first, as soon as they deal with the child. And very well explained. And I think I'll hand it over to EDU TV now.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude our discussion on the relevance of boarding schools and our education, I want to express heartfelt thanks to our esteemed guests, Mr. Pankaj Joshi, Principal of Academic Girls School, and Miss Nandita Sahu, Principal of General Model School. Your insights have been truly enlightening. A special thanks to Miss Mona Mehra, founder of Vision Search, for expertly guiding our conversation. Your perspectives on holistic development and community building in boarding schools have been invaluable. On behalf of EDU TV and our viewers, thank you for enriching our understanding of this important topic. Let's carry forward these insights to foster even better educational experiences for all. Thank you once again and have a great day ahead. Warm regards,
Thank you
Harsh.
so much. Thank you so much,
Thank
everybody.
you. It was
Everybody,
lovely.
thank you, Mona.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank you,
Yes.
Pankaj. And thank you,
Thank you,
Harsha.
ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
for
It
having
was
us.
lovely
Thank you so
interacting.
much.
Thank you.